I'm interviewing writer, creative director, and international keynote speaker Tim Voors, author of 3 #1 Amazon bestsellers, including The Great Alone, which documents his nearly 2,700-mile journey along the Pacific Crest Trail. Tim has also hiked the Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand, the 88 Temples Trail in Japan, the Kungsleden in Sweden, and Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Tim is speaking to me today from his home base in Amsterdam, though his travels and work take him all over the world. Tim, it's truly an honor to chat with you today. Welcome to my Zoom.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored.
So exciting. So I wanted to start by asking you larger questions about your experience and about why you were driven to do this. The idea of finding oneself in nature has always compelled the human spirit. Witness Into the Wild by John Krakauer, Wild from Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail by Cheryl Strayed, which was also a movie with Reese Witherspoon. Even the writings of Walden Pond by Thoreau. Why do you think this is? Why are humans, as social and community driven as we are, still pulled to the wilderness?
Good question. Let me think. I mean, a lot of it is subconscious. So we're kind of looking for an answer to your question. I think a lot of it is not a conscious decision by a lot of people. It's a drive, or it sort of happens. So I think a lot of the people that you refer to, and even just people who like to hike a lot, be it with their dog or up in the hills, they couldn't probably answer the question themselves. It's sort of either it's a counter reaction, perhaps to the busyness and the stresses that society asks of us. And I think in my case, I can only answer that question now that I've been doing this for perhaps 7 or 10 years. But going into it, it wasn't like a conscious decision, like I need to do this, and all this sort of, because then it also becomes more pretentious, I think.
Okay.
I think it's just something, perhaps the cities are driving us out into the woods, just because they're just a bit too much after a while, and that some people find that they are more at peace or become more themselves among the woods compared to the role they have to play in cities. But again, it's different for everyone. And if you like it, it's just like Marmite. I don't know if you know the ad.
I do know what Marmite is.
You love it or you hate it.
Right. One or the other.
Exactly. So there's enough people who go camping for one day and they really hate it.
Yeah, that's funny. Very true. You experience... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's an interesting question. Why? I mean, the writers that you refer to, they've managed to write stories that also inspire and captivate people in such ways that they manage to inspire people to go out and hike in the nature, which is quite an amazing feat if you can do that with just words on paper. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a romantic notion about it. But at the end of the day, if it rains and you get wet, and it's tough, and it's not like you leave the comfort behind.
Right. I mean, in your opening couple pages, that myth that romantic notion of being out in the wilderness is quickly dispelled, right? You're like, oh, this is intense, real, extremely hot, and there's no water.
Yeah.
It's suddenly shifted very quickly to reality. Is that accurate?
I think it's probably still a combination of the two, because if you lose the romantic magic of the idea of let's say in my case, walking from border to border, it just becomes a really long, painful walk. So if it's just the reality of getting up, getting into your wet clothes from the day before, doing another 20 or 30 miles, it's tough. So I think you kind of need the romantic notion in the back of your system. Otherwise, it's just too much.
I get it. I get that.
So I think it's a sweet combination of the sweet and sour.
Yeah. The romantic notion gives you hope to continue.
Yeah, hope and yeah, just everything that is in a romantic notion. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in that which are very hard to explain with words, but kind of it's just an idea that captivates your mind and that you can't really let go.
Yeah.
And obviously if you do quit and you go home, you for whatever reason on a big trail like that, you do still grow to sort of regret it really fast. So and I don't know, it's you definitely need that sort of that carrot, that idea of the romantic, the goal, because without it, it's just a really long, wet, tough walk.
Right. Sure. Analogous to life, I would say, right? You always need.
I hadn't asked myself that question yet.
You experience a lot of wildness on the trail, the obvious wildness of nature with thunderstorms, rattlesnakes, dangerously steep descents, but also the wildness of people. You hear gunshots and screams at one point in the desert and almost get run over by a logging truck on another night. What frightened you more on the trail, nature or humanity?
I guess ultimately it's your own mind that frightens you the most. Okay. Especially if I may just, the year in preparation for a trail like this. And you read about all these bears and snakes and people, and you read the news about America and you're like, whoa, it all sounds pretty scary.
Yeah, right.
But what I found is that the reality is quite different. So first of all, the Americans are so wholesome and kind and welcoming, which I just loved, especially in the small rural villages, offering me a shower, or that I could pitch my tent, or give me a ride, or offering to pay my burger. Yeah. I really enjoyed meeting the Americans. But I think the obstacles and the fears, sure, they're out there. But what I found is that they were a lot bigger in between my ears. Sure. Than the reality of seeing a snake or a bear. And that's something I really try to sort of address in my writing. Whereas a lot of people thinking about, hey, I'd like to do something like this, even if it's for a week, but they're still quite scared about, let's say, the wildlife or whatever, which is normal, which I had the same. But I try to give them that sort of encouragement that actually once you get out there, it's a lot less scary than you may have thought. But I mean, I definitely had my scary moments, and I think one of them was just learning to be alone. It's something until my 40th, I'd had, I like to surround myself with people. Social, and the idea of doing something alone was kind of thought of as boring or a bit weird, or I don't know. So I had to learn to be alone, and it took me some time, but I grew to love it. So that was definitely, let's say, another scary thought that I managed to sort of twist to comfort.
Okay.
So I think that's what I learned on the trail, was that a lot of these fears, although I had to face them, I didn't overcome them, I think. That's a too big a word, but at least I went out there and did it.
Mhm.
They became a bit less scary.
Yeah. That's actually my next question. I myself have been interested in doing a couple days of silence. This is funny, but especially after our last election cycle, when everyone's talking and everything
Yeah,
feels crazy, I was like, everyone just needs to stop talking for 2 days.
yeah,
But this is really hard in society, right? I wanted to explore that more, those concepts of quietness and solitude, solitude being different than feeling alone.
yeah,
But I have, we've got a 7-year-old daughter. I'm doing school drop-offs and
yeah.
volunteering and doing these things. How do we, without the immediate ability of going on a hike for a couple days, how do we do that? And then how do you balance that? How do you teach that to your children, those
Mm.
values, when everything that we experience in the modern world feels so contrary to that?
Mm. I mean, I'm a very verbal person, and I talk a lot. I
Okay.
mean, like some people, I wish I would speak less. And it's also at some point you kind of get sick of hearing your own voice. Not always, but sometimes.
Mhm.
And I guess these long trails give at least me the opportunity to try stuff.
Mhm.
It's perhaps a bit, well, a little strange. And for example, one day I decided to stop talking for a week,
Mhm.
and just to see, more as a fun experiment, to just see what happened.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, I wasn't, like yourself, bringing my kids to the school and everything, but I was still interacting with the community around me. And I was still going into town, and I did find that I learned a lot. Like, by speaking so much, I gave others less the opportunity to say what they had to say. By not speaking, I wasn't able to complain. I wasn't able to curse. I wasn't able to make, kind of annoying jokes at the cost of others, or express, but I was still able to communicate. And so, coming back to your question, how do I teach my kids this? Or I think I just do it, and they sort of see it. So obviously, a lot of how our children learn is just not by how we verbalize and teach them things like at school or stuff, or the values, all the values that you have taught your children. They just learn by seeing you. And I think just by doing the stuff I do, for example, leaving home for such a long time, obviously that has an effect on them. And by not speaking, they will pick that up and do whatever they do with it
Mhm.
without me sort of explaining it to them.
Mhm.
And perhaps just on that note, I recently read an amazing book by an American who, in the 1970s, he stopped talking for 17 years,
Oh my goodness.
and he stopped driving in motorized vehicles for 22 years. It's called Planet Walker. And in the same period, he completed two masters and a PhD degree, and became ambassador to the UN for protecting the environment, all without speaking and all without getting into a single car. So sometimes it would take him 4 weeks to go to a client meeting because he would have to walk there. Amazing story, but it just goes to show how inspiring you can be without speaking, and you can even become a UN ambassador without opening your mouth. So to your question, I would just maybe even discuss it with your daughter and make it into, let's say, a fun experiment thing, and say, what about you and I not speak for, let's say, 24 hours? You know, start small, make it fun.
Yeah.
And you can giggle and you can do your things and you can still go to school, and maybe you even interact with the other mums, but you know, you just say, and they may think you're weird, but you know, maybe you can find a different, like a weekend or something, but still having this social interaction with the world and your child, and by not speaking and making it kind of fun, then you will just see what happens. It's not like a one size fits all. It's not like you'll suddenly get the holy grail, but you'll see by not speaking that other things happen. Things that you could not imagine, and things that I can't tell you because, you know, it's going to be personal.
Sure.
So I found it really, fun, beneficial, but also quite shocking. And if you're ever in the opportunity to just do it for 3 days or 4, you know, it's, I mean, you'll survive.
Yeah, for sure. I love this. There's so much here. I one of my older questions that I drafted was about that complaining. When you were silent, you realized you couldn't, you know, there was no to complain to. And so your actions shifted from one where you were maybe, you know, wanted to complain about something to one where you just had to do the thing. I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I just find this whole concept so amazing. I find it's so, I feel like it would be good for one's spirit. You know, it's contrary to what we do every day, but in those challenges are wonderful moments and learning.
Yeah, and I think they're referred to as word fasts.
Ah, okay, I like this.
So
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever done a fast or of any kind, but you know, it's kind of when you refrain from something else comes in its place.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, just do it.
Yeah.
And don't overthink it. And you can still communicate with your hands and and maybe have a little notepad to say important stuff. But like this guy, he couldn't call his mother because he couldn't speak to her.
Yeah.
But he gave lectures, imagine, at lots of universities without speaking.
Oh my gosh.
It's an amazing story.
I wrote down the book, so I will definitely be looking into that because that is quite fascinating.
And that's all in America.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
and that he did all that in America.
Right.
Right, actually, right where you live.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think it was just close to San Francisco. I forget exactly where. That's where he lived, and then he started walking around the whole country, and he walked around the whole country.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm definitely gonna look this up and order it. So we are in a global climate crisis, losing a ton of biodiversity and wild land. In conquering nature, are we losing our sense of who we are? What scares you the most about our future?
Ooh, difficult ones. Well, let's first start off by I think it was Roosevelt, but I'm not 100% sure. One of your presidents who created the wildlife and the national parks.
Yes, Teddy Roosevelt, the first
Yeah,
Roosevelt. Yes, uh-huh.
yeah. So, and I think it was the biggest single act to protect natural land ever.
Mhm.
And by doing this, you know, and it's pretty much still upheld that all this beautiful wildlife in America and nature is still relatively protected from, let's say, building or housing or stuff like that. So that's on a positive note, that
Mhm.
there's still a lot of land and wilderness out there. But to your question, I mean, you do, by walking through the entire length of the country, you do actually see it. And you, obviously, I don't see the exact transitions because I haven't been there 50 years ago. So, for example, you walk past a glacier and I just take it for what it is. But
Sure.
if I look at the picture of the same glacier 50 years ago, it was obviously bigger. So, and obviously the whole country, America, is in a blaze. It's all on fire. And I did come across different firefighters who later lost their lives, you know, protecting the land. So I mean, it's very dramatic. And in that respect, I think you in America are feeling the temperature rise a lot more than where I am in Holland, although I'm living 6 feet under sea level at the moment.
Right.
So the more the sea rises, the wetter, you know, it's going to get here. So what shocked me, I think, I mean, it's just so beautiful what you see. So it's more that you appreciate it, I think, and just see it and not. I think one of the difficult things I find with the whole climate discussion is that it's very much in the news. It's something that is talked about. It's very it's very heady, if you understand what I mean. It's all in
Sure.
the head. We're talking about it, we're reading it, we have an opinion, but
Mhm.
by going out there and living in nature, you actually see it and feel it, and you grow to love it with your own relationship, which in turn makes you more sort of want to protect it. I think that's not quite answering your question, but it's not something. So I'm not a person who is very like scared or worried, because that's sort of not my type of energy.
Okay.
I'm more like I want to see things and experience them and then react uh as a result. But I mean, I have to be honest, a lot of these hikes also involved long flights.
Okay.
You know, I have to go from Europe all the way to America in an airplane.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the discussion is in America at this moment, but let's say flight shaming is a big thing here in Europe.
Is it?
Oh, it's really big.
I don't think we're there yet, but I have heard about this. So tell me more about that. Oh my goodness.
So, well, basically, I mean, I'm just talking, let's say, about the hipster Amsterdam sort of, you know, who are aware about the climate change. You know, it's a big thing the past 3 years that, you know, like people are making conscious decisions to travel within Europe by train.
Yes.
And obviously Amtrak isn't the same as what we have. So
Right.
at least, but, and to be honest, the fares aren't super great. So it's still kind of cheaper to fly in Europe. But I think this whole, everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people are very much aware of the fact that internal flights in Europe are not very, well, everyone's still doing it, but everyone's aware of the fact. So they're making like, well, I'll fly to the States, but not in Europe. So I think that's where people are in their head.
I see. Okay.
Um, Probably the reality is different, but I think we have moved from, let's say, like a political discussion to people actually owning it and saying, I'm going to make the decision to travel by train. So that's definitely changed the past 3 years.
Okay.
But like I said, I mean, you guys have cars and planes.
Yeah.
Trains is not really a very good option yet. So in America, you don't really have a good alternative yet.
Well, correct. I think that's true. I think a lot of people, I mean, we are not having that flight shaming, I don't want to say issue, but I don't think we're there yet.
Well, I
I
mean,
think
it's definitely for Americans, flying is like a First Amendment. It's like a right.
we love our rights.
I know. Well, we do too. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
I
I
know.
know. I guess I'm saying to the detriment of, other things. I mean, circling back to the novel or to the Planet Walker offer, right? I
Yeah.
mean, walking was not convenient,
No.
I don't think we're willing yet to sacrifice
Yeah.
convenience for that. We're not willing to do that.
So I think this is now shifted
Yes.
here, say in Europe,
Yeah.
because obviously, if I go to Paris, well, actually, if Paris is for me, let's say 3 hours by train, 1 hour flight, but so people are making decisions. I'll spend the whole day in the train instead of 1 hour in a plane. So it's
Yeah.
definitely moving.
Okay. Well, I feel like that's wonderful news and inspiring. I feel like there's a larger conversation here about European preparedness for climate change versus American preparedness. I would even say unwillingness for climate, to make a difference in climate change. I have a very vivid memory of being in Europe when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and I saw I don't know what what it was called, but it was like levees in a river, and I'd never seen anything like that before. And someone that I was with said, "Oh, those are for rising
Yeah.
sea level." This was 20 some years ago.
Yeah.
Here we're still debating whether or not in certain states we can use the word climate change.
Yeah.
So anyway, it just speaks to that point.
Well, I mean, I think one big difference why, just to kind of protect, or the American point of view. I mean, in Europe, we get a lot of government tax incentives to buy, let's say, do solar panels.
Okay. Yeah.
So in America, if you're just working hard, it's still relatively expensive if you want to put $10,000 on your roof.
Yeah.
Now, if you get 2,000 of those $10,000 from the government, you're perhaps going to think different.
Yeah.
So in Europe, we just get a lot of tax incentives to stimulate, let's say, environmentally friendly cars or solar.
Yeah.
And in the States, that is yet to happen.
Yeah.
So you can't really, and I'm no different, so people are just work with incentives, I think.
Yeah. Right. It's hard to mobilize
Yeah.
behavioral change without a motivator.
Yeah, because it's just too expensive.
Right.
So
Totally.
I totally get that it's just going to take some time if the government doesn't sort of help you along.
Right. Sure. So what surprised you most about our country?
Well, how nice the people are.
Okay.
Well, and you got to imagine in Europe we get a certain kind of news, right? It's very polarized, and I'm sure America is very polarized.
Mhm.
Just like my own country is becoming. But if you kind of especially I don't like spending much time in cities in America,
Mhm.
but I do love spending time in sort of rural. I don't like spending time in cities anywhere in the world.
Okay.
So I just like small town places, and I was really along the trail, really welcomed in by so many good folk. Like I said, just giving trail magic, or just,
Mhm.
and you got to imagine, I had this huge beard. I was like 45. I had a huge gray beard. I haven't washed for 7 days, and just come off the mountain, and a friendly lady gives me a ride and offers me to pitch my tent in her yard.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, and I can remember being really shocked by a sentence that a young American friend on the trail said to me. She said, "Now that I've hiked the trail, it's kind of restored my faith in humanity." I
Mhm.
was like, "What?
Yeah.
How can you be saying that at such a young age? Why? What's gone wrong that you had lost your faith?" Um, so obviously, I don't know. I don't understand how people live in cities and in the States, but I think the whole sort of community sense you experience on the trail with all these hikers and in the small towns,
Mhm.
definitely, and everything goes slow, and you're walking and you're not taking cars. So it's very personal and not impersonal.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of people, and especially Americans, kind of regain their sort of faith or trust in humanity. Like, hey, people are kind of okay. Strangers are okay.
Right.
But that's something I've just grown. My kids go by themselves on the bicycle straight through Amsterdam when by the age of 11,
Yeah.
and they're gone all day, and they return, and I have faith in my country.
Yeah.
So that's why I was surprised that these young people had this sort of lost this sense.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of good things that radiate out from doing one of these big trails.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's lots of bad things too, but I generally don't gravitate towards those kind of people.
Yeah.
And I think there's more hardship in cities, where people are really working hard and doing two jobs, which I can't imagine.
Yeah. Would you
I'm
hike?
gonna take a second wine if you don't mind.
Oh no, go for it. I already finished my second coffee, so
Right.
I'm caffeinated. Would you hike the Pacific Crest Trail again?
Well, it's so funny because when I was on it, you could imagine that practically everything hurts every day
Oh, I bet.
for like 5 months. So the idea of having to do it again was like insane. Like,
Mhm.
why would you even consider? So I think at the moment that you're doing it, there is no hair on your head that is even going to consider it. But now perhaps I'm, what is it, 7 years on, 6 years on, and I definitely will be doing it again one day.
Oh, really?
So
Specifically PCT.
yeah, because the Pacific Crest Trail is kind of like, well, it was my first love, which is always good,
Okay.
but it is perfect in so many ways
Mm-hmm.
because it's got the desert, it's got the mountains, it's got the wet forests up north. It's got a lot of young folk on it, a lot of women. It's not just a man thing. So it's very, like, I would say 50-50 men, women. So
Okay.
it's a good mix. It's just great. And
Awesome.
people are just have no idea what they're doing,
Yeah.
which is the best. It's not all these experts and these sort of hardcore, you could do it with your daughter of 7. I met this family. It's insane. You won't believe this. I was hiking the CDT this year. I met this family, mother, father, and 5 kids, one of
Uh-huh.
which was 1 years old, and
Oh my goodness.
the oldest was, I think, 13. 5 kids, and they walked across America. I mean, I would not do this with my own children, but I'm just saying it is possible.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
We've done one of our last trips. We were not walking, but we were camping in Oregon, and we met a couple who had several children, 3, maybe 4, and they had rented their house for the year, and they were
Oh, yeah.
cruising through America on, in a trailer or
Oh, yeah.
RV. Homeschool, like just hanging out,
Yeah.
exploring the States and Canada. And so
But that's still with a car and a trailer
for
and
sure, no, much different,
these
much
guys were
different.
doing just camping,
Yeah.
carrying the woman was carrying the toddler on her back the whole way. I mean,
Wow. Yeah, that makes taking one 7-year-old seem very, very reasonable.
well, exactly. But even the idea of taking one 7-year-old for a week is even like quite complex in your head, right?
Sure. Yeah. But
But
that's
kids,
your
kids
micro
can do
adventure
anything.
thing.
Kids can do it. It's the adults that are the complicated ones.
For sure. I agree. I get that. Um, I have one more longer question. Tell me one thing you've learned from each of the major trails that you've been on with a cultural lens. So we've talked about the PCT, but what about the 88 Temples Trail, the trail in Spain and New Zealand? What did you learn there from those people?
Well, I think one sort of general observation that I came to see was actually quite interesting. You got to imagine America's relatively young, right? It's like, let's say 300 years old. I'm not quite sure, but the new America.
Sure.
And I've hiked through Japan, and there are these old pilgrimages, religious Buddhist pilgrimages of let's say for 1200 years, people have been doing the same. In Camino de Santiago, people have been doing it since the Middle Ages, like millions of people. And in the Mecca, each year I think 2 million people go to Mecca each year. So we've had this as people, this desire to, let's say, pay homage to an idea, or for some sort of cleansing or something. For millions of, or not millions, but thousands of years, people have done pilgrimages.
Yeah. Okay.
But in the past, it was always religious. Now, the good thing about it's Christian or Buddhist or Islamic. The good thing about, let's say, the trails in America, they're not sort of, let's say, hijacked by one religion.
Okay.
So most people out there are not specifically religious, but they definitely all respect nature. And what I found through all the trails that I've done, let's say Buddhist or Christian or non-Christian trails, that along the trail, there are these what we call trail angels. In Europe, you would call them monks and nuns, and in Japan, they are called I don't know, like monks.
Okay.
And there's all this community that will support the walkers. So, and even in America, they're called trail angels. So there's this whole network of people who really want to support and help the hikers. And the same you see in Spain on the Christian walk, and the same you see in Japan. And I found that really interesting that, some people like to walk and some like to support.
Mm-hmm.
There's all different. Anyway, so I found that really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I guess another thing that I've learned by going to all these places is that, let's say, the old saying that strangers are just friends that you haven't met before.
Uh-huh.
I think I grew to live that sentence. Like before, I didn't really know what it meant. But if you, like I said, if I knocked on your door and I had a beard like this and I haven't showered for 3 or 5 days,
Uh-huh.
and I say, hey, may I pitch my tent in your garden? If someone did that with me now, I would probably say no,
Yeah.
right? But just meeting all these strangers on the trail, but along the trail in these cultures is just, yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah.
And it's just fun, and so by stepping out of your bubble of bringing the kids to school and going to work and doing the same the whole time, I really enjoy meeting new people. And I find that's easier to do if you step out alone without your partner or without your, even stepping out, for example, in your case, with your daughter and doing stuff, you're going to meet people instead of taking your sister or your friend, your best friend. So, yeah, so I think that sort of meeting strangers all over the world is definitely what's just enriching. And I think you go beyond the prejudice of the news, because obviously, if we have an impression of what happens in Japan or what happens in or even in our own backyard.
Yeah.
We all have our prejudices, but by just simply going out there and meeting people, you can at least create your own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I guess not everyone is nice. I'm not saying that, but at least you're there yourself.
Yeah, you're making your own call, not following whatever
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. When you get back home, what's the first meal you make? You've been eating ramen and
Yeah.
trail
Well,
mix or
I think we all yearn for our own local dish, I think.
yeah.
I mean, just to tease, I'd had enough burgers and pizzas for a while.
Yeah.
Um, no, we have this very typical Dutch snack. It's called a croquette,
Okay.
and it's hard to explain, but it's just a pretty cheap, pretty bad quality thing, but it's very typical Dutch.
Yeah.
I think you just yearn for that typical local home, like my wife's really good soup,
Mm-hmm.
or even, going to my mother's and having a really traditional dinner. So I think you sort of connect it to the place and to the people.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a fun question for you. You're having a dinner party and you can invite 4 people, any 4 people from history, past or the present, living or dead. Who do you invite?
Well, we start off with Jesus.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions for him. Um, love to have a chat.
For sure.
I guess Malala. I think she's a modern day woman who I can learn a lot from. I love Richard Branson because he's very entrepreneurial. Perhaps my grandfather, who I never met, would have kind of been nice. Well, I think that's 4.
Mm-hmm. It's a good mix.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be for light conversation, but I like long, lengthy philosophical discussion. So
Uh-huh. Yeah, that would be an interesting one. So your next book, well, Next to Us, Not Alone, is going to be published in English in the fall, correct?
yeah,
Okay, so that's exciting. What
yeah.
else are you working on?
Sorry.
What else are you working on?
Well, yeah, so the book Not Alone is about the trail in New Zealand, and it's going to be published by a New Zealand author publishing house.
Okay,
So I hope they will put it on the American Amazon so everyone can buy it.
for sure.
So I've been working on that a lot, and I just released a book in Holland called The Northern Light Walkers, which is in Dutch, and it's about the Kungsleden in Sweden.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited because yesterday I just signed a new, well, I just got at least a new proposal to write a book in English with Gestalten again about my trail on the CDT.
Right. Yes.
So that's super exciting for me.
That's great.
Yeah. So I mean, we still have to sign it and everything, but it's gonna happen, I think. And so that will be the let's say the follow-up of the Great Alone
Okay.
in America.
So are you going to be is it called a triple crowner? Is that right?
Yeah, but I need to do 3 and I've only done 2.
Right. Are you going to do the Appalachian one?
I will one day, but I kind of have to need it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to do it like, oh yeah. So I think I have to wait another 4 years, so I just can't wait, kind of thing.
Okay.
So, and I mean, I would love to do it, and I think I will, but what happens when I've finished?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there is a woman who's a triple crowner, but
she's done the three times.
right.
No.
So,
Oh.
but I mean, for now, I'm dreaming of the Peace Trail.
Okay.
It's basically you hike down the land of Jordan,
Okay.
and then through Petra and all these ancient, well, basically through a red desert, and you're sleeping with all the Bedouins, and I mean, you know, it's Islamic, and you have all this good food, and then cross the border into Israel, and then walk up all the way up through Israel. With all its history and people and well, so that's, I think they call it the Peace Trail. So that's my next exciting project. So if you want to come along,
sounds great. I would love to.
I mean, sounds like a plan, right?
Sure. That's funny. Petra has captured my imagination for some time. I feel like there's the columns like carved into the rock. There's like some, I mean, it's just remarkable. Yeah, let me know when you're going.
Yeah. I'll see you there.
Sounds
no,
awesome.
But imagine just waking up at 4 a.m. and being there before the crowds and just walking in. I mean, there's a book that's not out in English yet, but as soon as it is, I'll let you know.
Okay.
It's by a very inspiring Dutch woman she's called, it's out in Dutch and it's in German, but I hope it will come out in English soon. And it's called The Full-Time Adventurer. And anyway, she walks through, she's like a 27-year-old woman alone walking through Jordan, and then on the second week she buys a donkey, but from some people that she's staying with, and then she continues walking through the whole country with a donkey. It's a great book.
That's amazing. So she's putting the packs on the donkey? I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think, I mean, the animal has to eat, so I probably like a pack with its own food on it.
Sure.
But it's more like she talks about the effect of having an animal with you and having to adapt to the pace of the animal instead of. So I think I would actually learn a lot from walking with an animal because it would slow me down. You know, like we talked before about not speaking. Imagine walking with an animal that you just can't just run and focus on yourself. You have to focus on the animal. And I think I would learn quite a bit about myself.
Not rushing. which is
Right.
another human compulsion, right? Like we got to just finish the thing.
Gotta do our thing.
Yeah, but yeah, for sure, an animal would make you rethink that.
Yeah, and she writes a lot. So she walks through Mongolia a lot with camels, and anyway, she's great. So if you ever want to go to Mongolia,
Yeah,
walk with her.
yeah. Are you writing in English and Dutch? Are you able to write in both, or do you write in Dutch
Yeah.
first?
No, so I write in English first, and then I translate it into Dutch.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And sometimes I write a book first in Dutch and then I translate it into English.
Okay.
So it just depends a little bit on the publishing deal I have.
I see.
Um, yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely for me also a new adventure,
Yeah.
right? To write and to learn but I love it.
Yeah. That's really cool. Um, let's see. You're doing the peace trail. Okay, one last question. What is one thing you haven't done yet in life that you would like to achieve?
Well, I haven't died yet, and obviously that's not something I want to achieve, but that's definitely something I haven't done yet. It is something I think a lot about, to be honest, just from a positive point of view.
Sure.
Sort of, but anyway, that's another call. Um, what is something I've not done yet? I mean, perhaps I can answer that question in a different way. So I don't think I really have big things I still want to do because I basically do the things I want to do.
Okay.
So I obviously have to earn money. I have to spend time with my family. I have to go on trips with my family. And I enjoy this, but I'm sort of following the philosophy of not postponing. And so I believe that if you have an itch or a dream, that it's good to speak about it with your partner or your boss and start small and start saving, but make it happen within, let's say, 2 years. Because our life is so short, and I may be dead in 2 years, and so may you be. And maybe that's not a big problem. But if we postpone our big dreams too long, then we may get sick, or I don't know, life happens and things get in the way. So I don't think I've quite answered your question, but I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
I think it's not so important to have big dreams or big goals. I think it's more important to just start doing them,
I love it.
if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, people have to do their own lives, and it's complicated, and you have to pay the bills, and you have children and everything, but postponing and waiting for the right moment is just not going to happen.
I get it. I think that's part of, right, what's remarkable is everyone's got complexity, everyone's got responsibilities. No one is, just free to do whatever they want all the time. So you have to work at it and strive at it to make it a reality.
Yeah, and it's definitely a challenge with young families. And I think everyone can follow their own flow and make it work.
Yeah.
You don't have to, but I think what I've just seen, there is a lot possible, even if you just make it small.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this new things with my children because they're a bit older now. They're like teenagers or just about to leave the house.
Yeah.
So I'm doing these 24-hour challenges with them. So I'm, well, not challenges, but just trips, like 24-hour road trips. And obviously Europe's very small. So I drove to Paris last weekend.
Mhm.
And next week I'm driving to Dortmund in Germany, just with my son. So it's kind of for you, you know, driving to the next state and just eating a steak in every state. Or, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be expensive or big, or, but just spending time with them is kind of my new thing, to just go on little road trips with them.
Yeah. I love it. Micro adventures, as you call
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your writing is wonderful and your adventures are very inspiring, and the artwork and photography in your books are also just amazing. So I'm so grateful to spend this time with you this morning. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Tim.
Well, thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you.